There are many things and situations in Telltale's The Walking Dead series that are mysteries to us even to this day, as to what really happened in that event. One of the scenes that I keep coming back to really get a grasp as to what really happened in that moment is the moment that Kenny decides to sacrifice himself in episode 5 of season 1. The main question that I want to figure out is, how did Kenny survive in Telltale's The Walking Dead season 1? So I'll go over some of my personal theories as to what Kenny did to get out of the situation for him to survive and get out of Savannah. Without going any further, let's get right into it. Now let's take a look back at season 1 episode 5's No Time Left. For context, the group find out that Lee's been bitten, go through the conflict inside the mansion, and find out where they have to go next to find Clementine by the radio, where they were all stuck inside the attic. The group eventually break through, finding a way out. They decide the best course of action to get to Clementine would be to go from each rooftop to get to the Marsh house where she was residing at.
Looks like we can stay off the streets all the way to River Street if we're careful.
From this point onwards, Kenny's sacrifice can either be one of two things. One, he sacrifices himself to save Ben, who ends up falling in the alleyway, or two, where he goes and sacrifices himself to save Krista, in which she was trying to get the radio that Kenny accidentally caused to go down in the dark building. Either of these two options determines whether or not you save Ben at Crawford. Starting off, we'll go with if you decide to save Ben and have him stay in the party. Now everyone of course crosses to the building, all except for Ben, who falls and gets impaled by the same railing he tried to jump off of. Kenny, without really second guessing, decides to head down and try to get Ben off the railing. But unfortunately, Kenny and Lee weren't able to do anything to help him, which soon after, Walker showed up due to Ben screaming with the pain. Since the two figure out that neither of them are able to save Ben, Kenny tells Lee to go on without him, so that way he can focus on getting Clementine. Kenny locks himself with the door, and so Kenny fights off the walkers and spares Ben's life by shooting him, that way he doesn't have to suffer being devoured by walkers. And so we don't see or get any indication of what happened to Kenny.
Fuck, Kenny!
Lee, it's okay.
No, kid. No, it's not!
It's just something I gotta do. You know that. Go get that girl.
That is until season 2, where we see that Kenny's alive, which he claims that he got really lucky.
Like it ain't been easy for you. I'm sorry, darling. I wish I could have found you sooner. But everything's gonna be fine now.
Where have you been?
Oh, hell. All over after Savannah. Long story short, I got lucky. Real lucky.
Question is how though? What exactly did Kenny do to get out of that situation? Without resorting to plot armor, of course. Looking back at where they were positioned back in the alleyway, you would notice that without having access to the gate, there's not a whole lot of ways that Kenny would have been able to escape. One option would be that Kenny escaped through one of the windows. Now, from looking from the different angles of the actual alley, he would have to use one of the 3 windows on the right side of him, since the other 3 on the left are boarded up, making it to where Kenny would have to break through with his gun to even remotely break one of them and hop inside the building. And we know that he wouldn't be able to shoot the gun since he already used the last bullet on Ben.
God damn it! Oh, fuck! Kenny!
Also, since he mentioned earlier that the gun only had 1 bullet left inside.
Got at least 1 shot left. Do you have any bullets left? This has only got 1 left in it.
Second option would be that Kenny made a run for it and somehow made it through the horde. Personally, this wouldn't be very hard to believe, considering the fact of how many walkers were there, present in the alley, and to go through all those guys and not getting bit nor killed is highly unlikely. People were saying in regards to the scene that you can see Kenny run around the corner towards the left side of the building, but I kind of find that hard to believe, not just the fact that he would have to get past all those walkers, but the fact that both Krista and Monique would have seen him in the streets. With them having sights above being on the rooftop, that also includes option 1 with the window, because I'm sure at least Krista would have seen Kenny bust or open a window instead of being clueless as to actually not knowing what happened to him. Third option would have to be the Glenn move, where Kenny goes under Ben's body to mask himself from the walkers, and have Ben be bait as Kenny's underneath him. Again, it's pretty hard to believe that Kenny did that. He would have had to been quite fast to lift Ben's body and go underneath him before the walkers get to him. You can see by the time that Kenny shot Ben, you can see how close the walkers got to him right after. If anything, in my opinion, if he were to do something similar, I would think that killing a walker and using him as bait would have been a higher chance of working. Fourth and last option would have to be hiding in a dumpster. Perhaps Kenny last minute went dumpster diving, went and put a trash bag on top of him, and prayed that nothing would happen to him. Though it sounds ridiculous, it's not too far-fetched to consider that neither Lee, Krista, nor Omid saw nor figure out what happened to him, and also the fact that all the walkers are standing still doing nothing. From all what I said, the only way Kenny would realistically gotten out of there was finding out that one of the windows was open, and so he hopped right inside. Because making a run for it is highly unlikely for him to be in one piece. Pulling a Glenn and hiding it underneath Ben's body might have worked, but he has no time to be able to pull Ben off the railing and use his body as bait, and going in the dumpster wouldn't happen since the can doesn't even look big enough for Kenny to fit into. Which leaves us with all the options for the first path. Now let's head over to what Kenny would have done if Ben wasn't with the group and that Krista was the one that he was putting his life on the line for. So if you decided not to have Ben in the group would successfully made it across the alleyway and make it near River Street where they plan on going to meet up with Clementine. Upon almost arriving there, the gang come across a dark room within the building. As they were about to keep going, Kenny, with the intention of supporting Lee, pats Lee on the back too hard to the point where Lee ends up dropping the radio. The group go into a minor panic. Krista decides without second guessing, drops down to grab the radio, and thus the guys try to get to her by reaching. Kenny, in guilt, decides to drop down to help Krista get out of the room, but once Krista makes it back to the surface, walkers within the building come out of hiding, walking towards Kenny. And so the walkers coming towards him, Kenny goes missing in the darkness, shooting a couple of shots, but ultimately we never get to know what truly happened to him for him to get out. Now with the outcome where Kenny goes on to save Krista instead of Ben is a lot more plausible for him to survive due to a couple of factors. One of the main ones being to where he has a lot more space than a simple alleyway to get out of, and the fact that it's hard for him and the walkers to see. It does sadden me though how they all would have been still together if they actually thought it through than just going down there to grab the radio. One being where Krista was having trouble getting out of the hole, the group could have used something else besides the pole to help her, like the green garbage can where she could have used that as a stepping point to jump up from. Or another being where the group could have tethered themselves with each other, holding one another, pulling her up. Anyways, the first thing Kenny might have done to get out was by some sort of entry point like a door or downstairs area to get to avoid the walkers. Now, there are different versions of Season 1 where depending on the shading and brightness, inside the building could look pitch dark or dim to the point where you can still see the walkers, but further away from the light, the harder it would be to see. So perhaps it wasn't as dark, but for clarity, I'm gonna go with it was pitch dark inside since Krista said it, and the fact if you noticed on the side of the building that practically most of the windows are boarded up. Other than that, we see in Season 2 that Kenny survives both these scenarios, saving Ben or saving Krista, depending on your choices. But this is really just giving insight on what Kenny possibly did in escaping. Now with Kenny and how he got out of Savannah is still up for speculation since Kenny keeps it pretty vague, mentioning that he spent a long time alone after the situation and that he eventually ended up meeting Sarita at one point before getting to the ski lodge. I'm sure as well along the way that he met someone or something that showed him the rumors that Wellington is a real place that people are heading towards. Would have been cool if they decided to give us DLC as to what really happened to Kenny after leaving Savannah.